This is your yard sitting there empty, but brimming with potential. If money and skill were no object, how might you turn this little piece of land into your happy place? Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my garden. My name is Vanessa, and I turn our yard into our own little happy place at home. And I want to give you whatever tools I have to help you do the same. Today, we're talking about garden design, which is probably the one thing most of us backyard gardeners wish we knew more about when we were starting out. In my part of the country, not many people work on their backyards, so garden design is just not a concept I was very familiar with. Well, honestly, most people aren't even that familiar with the concept of gardens in the backyard in general. When I tell people that I help folks turn their backyards into gardens, they assume I mean vegetable gardens. And I have to explain that no, what I mean is pretty landscaping all over the yard to encourage outdoor living. The word landscaping usually gets them to at least stop thinking about vegetable gardening, but it still falls short of describing what I actually mean. I guess it's because in this part of the country, landscaping tends to focus on just a few shrubs on the foundation of the house while ignoring the rest of the yard. I wouldn't exactly call that gardening. Personally, I wanted to look out of my window and see intentionally laid out gardens that invited my family and me on an exploration. I wanted a yard that was ideal for both solitary and social life. So a few years after starting to learn how to grow vegetables and flowers, I turned my energies to creating this sort of ideal outdoor space for social life, but quickly learned that I'd made a mistake. I'd spent so much energy learning how to grow plants, but not enough on how to design gardens. Evidently, being a flower grower did not necessarily produce a great garden designer. And a gardener, a true gardener, which is what I want it to be, knows how to do both of those things. Knows how to design a garden and how to tend to it year round. I did figure it out how to marry the two in time. And I'm still learning, of course, but today I'll share with you the principles of design that I've been implementing in my own journey in the last few years to turn this place into something that we love. This video is what I wish I knew when I was first starting my gardening journey. We'll break the process into 3 steps: functionality, planting, and garden decor. The first 2 steps you could use in any kind of garden design, but the third one is where we'll specifically hone in to add cottage charm to your garden. So let's begin. First, we must consider the backbone of your garden, of any garden really, and that is its use in your life. How will this space be used for the betterment of your family? I'd argue that this is the most important step to creating a pretty backyard. You don't want to create a space that you won't use. You want to give yourself an invitation to always come and explore your garden. Let me tell you a story. Last year in the summer, I was due to give birth to my second child. I wanted to make sure that I stayed active until the moment that I gave birth. And so I walked my yard and garden every night for about 30 to 40 minutes. My backyard's about 1/4 of an acre. It's not that big, but it's designed to encourage a walk. And so evening upon evening after supper, I walked. Sometimes by myself, sometimes with my boy or my husband, but often stopping to see the flowers. I was able to walk my own backyard as opposed to needing to walk a public trail elsewhere because I designed it to be able to function that way. I took space that was otherwise useless and made it useful for our family. I had to repeat the loop multiple times to make the walk last 30 minutes, but I was never bored and always looked forward to it in the evenings. And so you see, intentionally considering the function of this garden that you're wanting to create cannot be overstated. It's your space. Make it serve you. Because it is the most important part of garden design, this section is lengthy, and so I want you to stick with me. To make this section easier to understand, I've gone ahead and broken it down into 3 steps: the dream, the dull work, and then the design. To begin, if you have no clue what you want in your yard, then you need to reflect on who you are as a person and as a family. Do you have kids, grandkids? How could they use part of the yard? What about your husband? What outdoor needs might he have? What about you? Do you have friends over a lot? Do you want a lawn to play yard games? Would you eat outside if you created an outdoor space? What about a fireplace in the winter for outdoor living? A pool, a pond, a gazebo, a walking path? I hope you get the idea. This is your yard sitting there empty, but brimming with potential. If money and skill were no object, how might you turn this little piece of land into your happy place? The point here is to lay your desires bare so that you know what your options are. Make the list. Dream a little. Now that you have brainstormed, you need to narrow your list down to what is actually realistic considering your budget and resources. Because unless you have unlimited resources and space, you won't be able to do all that's on your list. Prioritize. Once you've done that, you must head to the place of endless inspiration. Pinterest. You need to research layout ideas for all of the items left on your list. You're merely trying to get an idea for what version of those things you like. Do this step for every single one of the items on your list and save your favorite images. We'll use them later. Hopefully, after this step of dreaming and searching for inspiration, you'll just be itching to move on to the next step to bringing your wishes to life. And you'll need that little bit of itch because next, let's move on to the part of the process that I'm calling the dull work. Because, well, you have to do some boring but necessary work of surveying your yard. A yard survey can be a very technical thing, but for your DIY purposes, I want you to just go outside and make note of the following 5 things. First, observe your light. Do this on a sunny day when you'll be home all day. Set a timer to go off every hour so that you can record the sun's behavior in your yard. The easiest way to do this is to label different parts of your yard. Maybe the section in front of the shed could be named the section in front of the shed. The space to the left of the maple tree can be to the left of the maple tree. Or the back left of the house could be labeled the back left of the house. Your goal here is to write down whether or not there is sun or shade in each section for each hour of the day. This will help you determine where to place some of the things on your list, not just your plants, but also some of the very structures. For example, you would not want to place your children's play area in the sunniest part of your yard if you could put it under a tree that would give them shade in the middle of the afternoon. Next, you need to survey your privacy. Is there anywhere in your yard that inherently has more privacy from your neighbors than others? Do you want more privacy? Do you want to build a fence? Or would you prefer an evergreen hedge that you would want to create from trees or shrubs? The third thing you need to think about and survey is the slope of your yard. Do you have an incline? How steep is it? This will determine whether or not you need to level your ground or maybe even plan for a retention wall. A decent way to do this would be to survey your yard on a rainy day. You are looking for water runoff, and this will help determine whether or not you have any boggy areas all over your yard that needs to be addressed. Number 4, as boring as it sounds, you need to know where your utility lines are. Do you have septic in the yard? What about underground wires for electricity? You need to know these things, and you could go to your county and they might have a copy of the plot of your property, and that could help you determine where some of these things are. Otherwise, you may have to hire a professional to come and do a topographical survey. But knowing these things will help you not ruin them by planting things too close to them. The 5th and final thing, and I should have started with this one, but you need to measure the size of your yard. You can either measure it yourself, or you can get the measurements from those records I was talking about from the county, or you could get it from your topographical survey. Having data on these 5 things should be sufficient boring work to help you get started. And now we can move on to the design. Now that you have a plan of your plot, your shape, the light requirement, privacy, you need to do a rough sketch of your yard. You don't have to be an artist, just stick figures will do. What you're trying to do here is draw something relatively to scale of the structures that are already in your yard. For example, I have 2 sheds in my yard that would have gone on my map. Don't forget things like trees and patios, because these are large structures as well. Now that you have the map of your yard as it is currently, you can start to pencil in some of the very items that you narrowed down for inspiration earlier. Keep in mind the results of your survey. Let it be your guide as to where you place certain things. Make a few different iterations of this, move a few items around on your map to see if there's a version of it you like better, and then decide on the one that you like best. Once you've settled on exactly what you want to have in your yard, you could improve on the design by using something like graph paper to draw something even more to scale. But you can always work off of the rough sketch. Any planning is better than none. Don't feel like you have to make it perfect. If you follow the steps thus far, with some practice, you should have a map of something lovely waiting to be brought to life in time. It won't be professional like the ones the actual garden designers do. That's okay. You're not a garden designer, and nor am I. But this is a great place to begin. I hope I've managed to convince you to see the importance of this step of deciding at this early stage how this space will work for you. Everything builds off of that. While any garden should primarily be designed for functionality, the way it is planted is what gives it life. The plants are the life of your garden, and so now we must turn our attention to them. This topic is huge, really it is. Some people are great at growing plants while others are not. If growing plants are your thing, like it is mine, then you have half of this part down. You likely have a good idea of what you want to plant in your garden, even if you don't know exactly how you're going to design it. The point here is that someone like you and me welcome the opportunity to maintain plants because that itself is therapeutic. Others want a pretty yard and garden, but lack the knowledge of both how to grow things and how to design the very gardens themselves. This sort of person, I find normally say something like, I don't want a maintenance nightmare in the background. They mean they don't want to have to weed or have to cut back perennials or deadhead roses, etc. They want a one and done thing. To those people, I say that you should just plant shrubs and trees and perhaps just one perennial like salvia in the sun for color throughout the year. You'll, of course, always have some maintenance, but you can lessen it by limiting even the amount of perennials that you plant. Whether you are someone seeking low maintenance or someone who welcomes the opportunity to weed, here are some of the garden planting principles, particularly for cottage gardens, that will help you with your plantings. First, plant close. The hallmark of the cottage garden is that the plants are close. They grow into each other. And so plant close, but do consider that the plants start out small in the nursery, but will soon become mature. Allow for enough room for this to happen. 2, plant for the seasons. Do not make the mistake of planting flowers that will all bloom in one season. Winter needs some interest too. Plant for differing heights. Make sure to plan to add different heights to your garden. This means that you do want to plant trees and shrubs and perennials. Do plan to add your favorite cottage garden plants to your garden. That's number 4. For me, it's things like hydrangeas and lavenders and peonies and lilacs in the spring and daffodils and catmints, etc. One extra tip. If you want to take it a step further, you can start to pencil some of the very plants you want on your map, starting with trees. Don't forget the trees. Then move on to adding shrubs and then perennials. This will help you plan for the placement. In the end, when it's actually time to put the plants in the ground, you might deviate from the plan slightly, but it's still helpful to see it on paper. Now let's move on to the decor as it relates to the cottage garden. So far, you've created a plan to bring your dreams to life. You have an idea for how you'll plant your garden beds, but the last thing you must consider to create that cottage garden charm is to add what I call garden decor. By this, I mean to get creative. The cottage garden has charm because it often uses things like fountains, pots, moss, covered statues, old wheelbarrows, etc. Don't shy away from that stuff, but don't overdo it either. Overdoing everything might be the greatest crime of the cottage gardener. And so everything in moderation. An item tucked away here or there is charming. As you continue to work with the map of your yard, consider adding pathways. In the cottage garden, pathways tend to meander their way from one location to the other. They sort of snake through the garden to remove a direct line of sight through the garden so that your walk in the garden is filled with curiosity. To create a sense of what's next because you can't see it. And so in your map, draw your pathways and make them curvy. Consider adding a meandering brick pathway in particular, but even just the heavily mulched pathway will do. It depends on your budget. When you create your garden borders, you might also do them with curved lines as well. The soft curves of the cottage garden beds can even coordinate with the curved pathways to create even more mystery and charm. Finally, I encourage you to enjoy the process because depending on the size of your yard and resources, getting this project done may take longer than you wish. Start with just one of the features that we added from the wish list. If I were you, I'd start closest to the house and maybe a porch or a patio. Beautify those and then slowly start inching your way toward the back of your property. In no time, you'll start to see cottage garden charm pop up everywhere. I mentioned earlier in passing that overdoing it is the crime of the cottage gardener. It can tend to look messy. In this next video, I go to great lengths to help you prioritize the right garden design principles to help you avoid this mistake. Go watch it. It will help you become a better gardener and not just a plant grower. See you there.